The night air was thick with the sharp scent of smoke, a scent that clawed at the lungs and burned the eyes. It was the kind of night where every shadow seemed to flicker with danger, and tonight danger had found its home in the quiet neighborhood of Maplewood. A sudden burst of light ripped through the darkness. Flames licked hungrily at the sides of a two-story house, roaring like a wild beast unleashed. The fire spread fast, faster than anyone expected, swallowing everything in its path. Windows shattered under the heat, sending glowing shards into the night like sparks from a blacksmith's forge. Neighbors poured out of their homes, some frozen in horror, others already grabbing phones to call 911. Sirens wailed in the distance, the unmistakable sound of help on the way. But tonight, help might not come fast enough. Inside the burning house, the world was collapsing. Thick smoke twisted in curling columns, choking off the air and hiding everything in a ghostly gray haze. The crackle of fire and the groan of collapsing beams echoed through the walls. Somewhere deep within that inferno, a child was missing. No one knew if she was alive. This wasn't just another fire, it was a race against time. Officer Jake Carter's radio crackled with urgency. All units, fire reported at 48 Elm Street. Possible child trapped. Fire department en route, ETA 10 minutes. Jake's heart clenched. 10 minutes. That could be a lifetime in a fire like this. He glanced down at Ranger, his German Shepherd K9 partner, who sat alert beside him. The dog's ears twitched, nostrils flaring as he picked up scents invisible to human senses. Ranger's dark eyes were sharp and steady. He seemed to understand the weight of the moment better than anyone. "Let's move, Ranger," Jake said, voice low but firm. They sped toward the blaze, sirens screaming behind them. The streets were packed with neighbors watching in stunned silence. Some with tears, others clutching each other for comfort. Flames roared higher, licking the night sky, throwing flickering orange light on terrified faces. When Jake and Ranger pulled up, the fire was already consuming the house. The front door had collapsed inward, and a thick wall of smoke billowed out. The air was hot enough to scorch skin, and the smell of burning wood and plastic was overpowering. "Fire trucks won't be here for another 5 minutes, Jake muttered, his jaw tight. "If that kid's still inside, we don't have time to wait." He grabbed his helmet and a fire-resistant jacket from the back of his truck and handed Ranger a harness equipped with a GPS tracker and a flashlight. "You ready, buddy?" Ranger gave a low bark, tail stiff but wagging just slightly. Jake knew his partner's training was exceptional. Ranger could detect faint scents, navigate dangerous terrain, and stay calm in chaos. Tonight, Ranger wasn't just a dog. He was hope. The first step was the backyard. The fire was more intense at the front, and the backyard offered a chance to approach less exposed windows. Jake pulled on his mask and signaled Ranger forward. The dog darted ahead, nose to the ground. Seconds passed like hours. Then Ranger stopped abruptly and lifted his head, ears pricked. He barked once, a sharp, urgent sound. Jake sprinted to where Ranger stood and saw the shattered remains of a basement window, smoke pouring out in thick waves. Ranger circled the area, sniffing. Then he pawed at a broken piece of wood near the window frame. It was a sign, a clue that someone might be trapped below. Jake crouched and pressed his ear against the glass shards. A faint, desperate coughing echoed from inside. "Gotcha," Jake whispered. He radioed dispatch. "Possible victim found in basement. Starting rescue now." The fire department was still several blocks away. Jake had no choice but to go in himself. He nodded to Ranger, who wagged his tail, ready for the dangerous mission. The basement window was low enough for Jake to squeeze through, but the air inside was thick with smoke and choking heat. Ranger was already inside, moving carefully, his paws silent on the cold concrete floor. Jake followed, holding a flashlight and keeping low to avoid the worst of the smoke. Suddenly, a weak cry echoed faintly through the haze. "Over here!" Jake called, voice rough but steady. Ranger's ears perked, and the dog darted forward, nose twitching. There, trapped beneath fallen shelves and boxes, was a small girl, no more than 6 or 7 years old, coughing and terrified, her wide eyes filled with smoke and fear. Jake knelt beside her, pulling the debris away gently. "It's okay, kid. I'm here. We're gonna get you out." The girl clung to Jake's arm, coughing hard but alive. Ranger stood protectively nearby, growling low at the fire's roar. The real challenge was ahead, getting her out safely through the burning maze. Jake wrapped the girl in his jacket, feeling her shiver despite the heat. "Hold on tight," he said. He signaled Ranger, who sniffed the air and guided them back toward the window. The flames were closer now, heat blistering his face. Just as they reached the opening, a beam creaked ominously overhead. Jake shoved the girl out first, then scrambled out himself, pulling her to safety just as the ceiling behind them collapsed with a thunderous crash. Outside, the crowd gasped and neighbors rushed forward, some with blankets, others with phones capturing the heroic moment. Paramedics rushed to the girl, checking her vitals and wrapping her in a warm blanket. Jake crouched beside her, wiping soot from her face. "You're safe now," he said softly. At that moment, fire trucks arrived, firefighters bursting from their trucks with hoses and gear. Jake looked down at Ranger, pride swelling in his chest. "You did good, partner." The girl's mother arrived moments later, tears streaming as she embraced her daughter. The neighborhood exhaled collectively, relief washing over the night. And though the fire was still burning, one thing was clear. Tonight, a brave dog and his handler had saved a life. Mid-story call to action. If you want to hear more incredible stories of courage and loyalty, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Brave Animals. Every week, we share real-life heroes, both human and animal, who change lives when it matters most. Hit that subscribe button and join our community of animal lovers and everyday heroes. Jake stayed at the scene for hours, helping firefighters and giving statements to the investigators. Questions swirled. How did the fire start? Was anyone else inside? Why had the child been alone in the basement? For now, the answers were a mystery. But Jake knew one thing. Ranger's instincts had made all the difference. The bond between man and dog was more than training. It was trust, loyalty, and the unspoken promise to protect each other and the lives around them. As dawn broke over Maplewood, the charred remains of the house stood as a silent reminder of the night's terror. But in that darkness, a spark of hope burned brighter than ever. A little girl was alive, and heroes came in 4 legs, strong and silent. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting pale light over the smoldering remains of the house on Elm Street. Firefighters continued dousing the last of the flames, the crackling sounds gradually giving way to the steady hiss of water spraying over blackened wood. The neighborhood was quiet again, but the chaos of the night hadn't fully settled. Officer Jake Carter stood near the police tape, eyes fixed on the wreckage. Ranger sat faithfully at his side, panting lightly from the night's exertion, but alert as ever. Though the little girl was safe in the hospital, questions lingered in Jake's mind. Why had she been in the basement alone? How had the fire started? And most unsettling of all, were they sure she was the only one inside? Jake's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Deputy Chief Ramirez, a grizzled veteran with decades on the force, approached, his face solemn beneath his wide-brimmed hat. "Jake," Ramirez said, nodding curtly. "Good work last night. That girl owes her life to you and Ranger." Jake shrugged, brushing ash from his jacket. "It was nothing, just doing my job." Ramirez's gaze sharpened. "Listen, we're still investigating. The fire marshal found some irregularities. Something about the way the fire spread doesn't add up. And the neighbors, they say they heard a scream before the fire broke out." Jake frowned. "A scream? Nobody told me that." "That's because they didn't come forward right away," Ramirez said grimly. "But we're digging. I need you and Ranger on standby. There's more to this than meets the eye." Jake swallowed hard. The adrenaline of the rescue was fading, but now a different kind of tension gripped him. One that whispered of secrets waiting to be uncovered. Meanwhile, in the hospital, the little girl, now identified as Emma Matthews, lay in a quiet room bathed in soft morning light. Tubes ran from her tiny body, and machines beeped rhythmically, keeping watch over her fragile heartbeat. But her breathing was steady, her color improving. Emma's mother, Sarah, sat beside the bed, holding the girl's small hand, tears flowing freely. It was the longest night of her life, but seeing Emma safe was a miracle she wouldn't take for granted. The hospital room door opened softly. Jake stepped inside, removing his jacket out of respect. "Emma's awake," the nurse whispered. Jake approached cautiously, not wanting to startle the girl. Emma's eyes fluttered open, and she looked up at him, confusion and fear mixing in her gaze. "Hi, Emma," Jake said gently. "It's me, Officer Carter. You're safe now." Emma blinked, then smiled faintly, reaching for his hand. Jake sat down, squeezing it reassuringly. "You're very brave." At that moment, Sarah looked up, her gratitude evident. "Thank you for saving her." Jake nodded. "We just did what anyone would. But I have to ask, how did Emma end up alone in the basement? Did something happen? Sarah hesitated, eyes clouding with pain. I don't know. She was with her father. They had a fight earlier and he went out. I think Emma hid in the basement to be alone. I don't know if he even noticed she was missing. Jake's heart tightened. Family troubles, secrets hidden behind closed doors. He knew those stories all too well. Back at the scene, Jake and Ranger returned to the house to help the fire marshal with the investigation. The charred floorboards, twisted metal, and broken glass told a story of destruction, but something else caught Jake's attention. A small piece of fabric snagged on a nail near the basement window. It looked torn, as if someone had been dragged or hurried through. Ranger sniffed the air, ears twitching. Jake crouched, examining the fabric closely. This might be important. The fire marshal nodded. We'll send this to the lab. As they worked, a neighbor approached. A middle-aged woman named Linda, who lived across the street. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she clutched a scarf tightly in her hands. I heard the scream, she said quietly. Right before the fire. It was a little girl's voice. I thought maybe a cat was stuck or something, but then the smoke started. Jake leaned in. Did you see anyone? Anything unusual? Linda shook her head. No, but I saw a man running down the alley just before the fire started. Tall, wearing a dark jacket. I thought it was strange. Jake exchanged a glance with the fire marshal. Thank you. That's very helpful. As the day wore on, Jake and Ranger continued to patrol the neighborhood, their eyes scanning for anything out of place. The community was shaken, some families packing up, others standing watch in makeshift vigils. Ranger stopped suddenly at the edge of a nearby wooded area, nose twitching. Jake followed his gaze, heart quickening. Something or someone was out there. Good boy, Jake whispered, unclipping the leash. Ranger vanished into the trees with speed and purpose. Minutes later, Ranger reappeared with a crumpled piece of paper in his mouth. Jake took it carefully, unfolding a note scrawled in shaky handwriting. Help me. Please find her. Jake's mind raced. Who had written this? Who was asking for help? And how was it connected to the fire? That evening, Jake met with Sarah again. The little girl was resting, but Sarah looked worn. I don't know who could have left that note, Jake said quietly, but I'm going to find out. Sarah nodded, fear evident in her eyes. Please, I just want Emma safe. Jake glanced down at Ranger, who wagged his tail gently. Together, they would uncover the truth, no matter where it led. As night fell over Maplewood, the streets were quiet once more, but a storm was brewing beneath the surface. Secrets, lies, and danger lurked in the shadows. And Jake Carter, with his faithful partner Ranger, was ready to face it all. Because sometimes the bravest heroes are the ones who step into the smoke and shadows when no one else can. The morning sun filtered weakly through thick clouds as Officer Jake Carter sat at his desk in the precinct. The note found by Ranger lay spread out before him, its shaky handwriting haunting in its simplicity. Help me. Please find her. That cryptic message had set a new urgency to the investigation. There was more at stake than just the fire. Jake rubbed his temples, trying to piece together the puzzle. The fire had been devastating, nearly claiming a young girl's life. But this note hinted at a darker secret, a cry for help from someone still trapped in the shadows. He tapped his fingers on the wooden desk and glanced over at Ranger, who lay curled beside the filing cabinet, ears perked and alert. We're going to find the answers, boy, Jake murmured. I promise. Across town, Detective Lisa Morales was already digging through reports and interviews from the neighborhood. Known for her keen intuition and unyielding dedication, Lisa had been assigned to assist with the case. Jake trusted her judgment implicitly, knowing her reputation for uncovering what others overlooked. Lisa stood in the modest kitchen of the Matthews home, clipboard in hand, speaking softly with Sarah Matthews. The mother was visibly exhausted, but her eyes burned with determination. We want to know exactly what happened before the fire, Lisa said gently. Every detail could help us find who left that note and why. Sarah nodded, recalling the fractured family dynamics. Emma's father, he's been distant, angry. They argued that morning. I don't know where he went after. I was at work. Lisa scribbled notes. Do you have any contact with him? Has he been cooperative? Sarah hesitated. No, not really. He left town shortly after the fire. That news sent a chill through Lisa's spine. It wasn't just a broken family, it smelled of something more sinister. Meanwhile, Jake and Ranger combed through the wooded area where Ranger had found the note. The forest was dense, the early spring underbrush wet and tangled beneath their boots. Ranger's nose led them deeper into the trees, toward a narrow dirt trail barely visible under fallen leaves. Jake's breath was steady, but his heart pounded with anticipation. "Easy, Ranger," Jake whispered, watching the dog's focused movements. Suddenly, Ranger stopped, ears raised, tail stiff. Jake caught the faintest sound, a child's sob. He pushed through the last few branches and saw her. Another little girl, no older than Emma, huddled beneath a broken-down shed. Her clothes were dirty, knees scraped and bleeding. She looked up at Jake with weeny, terrified eyes. "Hey there," Jake said softly, kneeling. "You're safe now." The girl didn't move at first, just shook as tears spilled down her cheeks. Jake reached out, offering his hand. "What's your name?" "Lily," she whispered. Back at the precinct, Lisa sat down with Jake to share her findings. The pieces were beginning to form a picture darker than either expected. "The father's gone," Lisa said grimly. "But the woman who reported the screams saw that man running away from the house. It could be him." Jake nodded, tapping the crumpled note on the table. "And Lily, this girl Ranger found, she wasn't reported missing. At least not yet, but she's definitely connected." Lisa's eyes narrowed. "We're dealing with someone who's trying to hide things. Someone dangerous." As Lily warmed up at the station, Jake gently questioned her. She was shy and scared, but her story unfolded slowly. She had been living with her aunt, who wasn't kind to her. "She yelled a lot," Lily said quietly. "I ran away because I was scared." Jake's heart clenched at the reality many children face behind closed doors. "Do you know the girl in the house that caught fire?" Jake asked. Lily nodded faintly. "Emma, I met her once." The connection deepened. Jake realized that Emma and Lily's lives were tangled in ways no one had seen. That evening, Jake and Lisa convened at the precinct with other officers and the fire marshal. The investigation was heating up, the stakes higher than ever. "We found traces of accelerants," the fire marshal announced. "This was no accident." Jake's jaw tightened. Who would want to hurt those kids? Lisa shook her head. Someone with a secret to protect. Ranger sat at Jake's feet, alert and ready, as if sensing storm ahead. Under the dim light of a nearby diner, Jake met an informant with information about the father's whereabouts. The man was nervous but eager to help. "He's holed up in a cabin upstate," the informant whispered. "Hasn't been seen in days." Jake thanked him and drove into the night, Ranger beside him, ready for what came next. The investigation was far from over. Secrets lurked behind every shadow, and every step brought Jake and Ranger closer to the truth, a truth that could shatter the fragile safety of a small town. But Jake was certain of one thing. He wouldn't rest until every child was safe, and every secret was uncovered. Because sometimes the darkest fires revealed the deepest wounds, and only the bravest were willing to face them. The night air was crisp and heavy as Officer Jake Carter drove his beat-up cruiser up the winding dirt road that led into the dense woods of Pine Ridge. The moon hung low and full, casting long shadows through the towering pines that lined the narrow path. Ranger, his faithful German shepherd, sat alert in the passenger seat, ears perked as if listening to sounds only he could hear. Jake's mind raced with thoughts of the missing father, the man who had vanished after the fire, leaving a trail of questions in his wake. The more Jake learned, the more tangled the story became. A broken family, a fire set with intent, a frightened little girl found hiding in the woods. Something was deeply wrong. The radio crackled softly in the background, but Jake had silenced it, preferring the quiet tension that filled the car. He glanced down at the note that Ranger had discovered days ago, still folded neatly in his jacket pocket. "Help me. Please find her." Who had written it? Was it a plea from Lily or someone else entirely? The cruiser crested a small hill, and Jake saw it, a solitary cabin nestled between the trees, its weathered woods stained by years of rain and neglect. A single light glowed faintly from inside. He pulled the car to a stop, the crunch of gravel loud in the quiet night. Ranger leapt down, tail wagging, but body tense. Jake grabbed his flashlight and a baton from the console, stepping cautiously toward the cabin's front door. The porch creaked beneath his boots as he approached. He called out, "This is Officer Carter, police, we need to talk." No answer. Jake's hand rested lightly on the doorknob. The door wasn't locked. He nudged it open and stepped inside. Inside, the cabin was dimly lit by a flickering oil lamp on a rickety table. The air smelled of damp wood and stale smoke. The furniture was sparse, an old mattress in the corner, a battered chair, and a small stove that looked long unused. Jake's eyes scanned the room, searching for any sign of life. Then he heard it, a soft shuffle from a back room. "Hello?" he called, stepping carefully. We're here to help. From the shadows emerged a man in his late 30s, gaunt and unshaven, eyes wary and haunted. He wore a faded jacket and jeans, his hands trembling slightly. Jake recognized him immediately. This was Mark Matthews, Emma's father. Mark's gaze flicked to Ranger, who growled low in his throat, sensing the tension. "What do you want?" Mark's voice was rough, defensive. "We need to talk about the fire, Mark," Jake said calmly, "and about Emma." Mark's eyes darkened. "You don't know anything." Jake took a breath. "We know you left after the fire. We know about the argument you had. We need to understand what happened." Mark's shoulders sagged. Exhaustion and guilt etched deep into his face. He motioned toward the back room. "Sit down," he muttered. As Mark spoke, the story unfolded like a fractured mirror, shards of truth reflecting a family torn apart by pain and secrets. He confessed to struggles with anger, frustration, and mistakes he wished he could undo. The fight with Emma had been heated, but he insisted he never meant for things to get out of hand. "The fire, it wasn't supposed to happen," Mark said, voice barely above a whisper. "I was outside trying to fix the old heater. I didn't know it'd explode." Jake listened, skeptical but willing to believe. "And Lily," Jake pressed, "who is she?" Mark's eyes darkened. "She's my brother's daughter. She was staying with me and Emma for a while. Things got complicated." Jake nodded slowly, piecing together the tangled web. The note, the hiding girl, the missing father, all connected by a fragile thread of family pain. Suddenly, the cabin door burst open and flashlights flooded the room. Detective Lisa Morales and several officers entered, weapons drawn but faces set with determination. "We got a tip Mark might be here," Lisa said, eyes locking on Mark. "We're taking him in for questioning." Mark didn't resist. As officers cuffed him, his gaze lingered on Jake and Ranger. "Find her," he whispered, "before it's too late." Jake's pulse quickened. Find who? Another missing person? Another secret buried in the shadows? Outside, Ranger sniffed for the air, tail stiff as he picked up a faint scent. "Good boy," Jake said, following Ranger into the thick woods behind the cabin. The moonlight barely penetrated the dense canopy. The scent led them deeper, twisting between trees and fallen branches. Then ahead, a small clearing. There, huddled beneath a tarp, was a young woman. She looked frightened and exhausted, eyes wide with fear, but relief washing over them as Ranger approached. Jake moved closer. "Are you okay? What's your name?" She swallowed hard. "Maya, I've been hiding. They're after me." Jake's heart pounded. Another victim, another thread in this dark tapestry. Back at the station, Maya's story unfolded. She'd witnessed things she shouldn't have, secrets that put her in danger. Her uncle Mark, it seemed, wasn't the only one hiding sins. Jake and Lisa exchanged grim looks. The case had grown beyond a fire or a missing child. It was about survival, secrets, and uncovering the truth in a town that wanted to forget. That night, Jake sat alone in the precinct, Ranger at his feet. The weight of the case pressed down on him, but so did the hope. The hope that, no matter how dark the night, there was always a chance to bring light. Because sometimes finding the truth meant walking through the fire. And sometimes the bravest thing you could do was to keep going. The sun was setting behind the distant hills, casting long shadows across the small town of Maplewood. Inside the precinct, the hum of computers and the murmur of officers filled the air. Detective Lisa Morales leaned over a cluttered desk, scrolling through pages of files and cross-referencing reports, while Officer Jake Carter sat nearby, exhaustion etched on his face. The last few days had been a whirlwind, from the fire that nearly claimed Emma Matthews' life to the discovery of Lily hidden in the woods, then the tense confrontation with Mark Matthews, and the unexpected rescue of Maya. Every thread they pulled only seemed to tighten the web around a mystery far more complex than anyone had anticipated. Lisa looked up from her screen. "Jake, we've got something. Surveillance footage from a gas station 2 towns over." Jake swiveled his chair to face her. "What does it show?" Lisa hit play on the monitor. The grainy video flickered to life, showing a dark figure moving quickly past a gas pump late at night. A second person trailed close behind. A woman, her face obscured by a hoodie. "That second person, that's Maya," Lisa said softly. "And the man, the one leading her, matches the description of a guy seen near the Matthews property a few days before the fire." Jake squinted at the screen. The man's face was shadowed, but there was something familiar in his gait. "Could it be—" Jake trailed off. Lisa nodded. "Possibly the uncle or someone working with him." Meanwhile, at the hospital, Emma was improving steadily. Sarah sat by her side, exhaustion deep in her eyes, but hope blooming in her heart. The small girl had endured more than anyone her age should ever have to face. Jake stopped by to check in, sharing a smile with Sarah before kneeling beside Emma's bed. "How are you feeling, kiddo?" he asked gently. Emma gave a small smile. "Better." Jake ruffled her hair softly. "You're a real fighter." Back at the precinct, the pressure was mounting. The community was growing restless, whispers of fear and suspicion rippling through Maplewood. Parents kept a tighter grip on their children, and rumors flew faster than the police could manage. Jake and Lisa knew the stakes were high. Whoever had orchestrated the fire and the chaos wasn't finished. "We need to find Mark's accomplice," Jake said, "and fast." Lisa pulled up more files, tracing phone records and financial transactions linked to the Matthews family. Patterns began to emerge. Calls made in the dead of night, cash withdrawals with no clear purpose, a trail leading out of town and back. "It's like someone's trying to cover their tracks," Lisa said, "but they're sloppy." That evening, Jake and Ranger took a break at the local diner, the neon sign buzzing softly outside. Over coffee, Jake reflected on the case. "This isn't just about a fire or a missing child," he said. "It's about fear, control, and maybe even something darker." Ranger lay at his feet, ears twitching at the sounds of the busy diner. Jake knew his partner sensed it too, the invisible threads of danger weaving through the night. Suddenly, Jake's phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "Stop looking or someone else will get hurt." Jake's blood ran cold. The following day, the team coordinated a search of a dilapidated warehouse on the edge of town, a place rumored to be a hideout for Mark's network. Jake, Lisa, and a squad of officers approached cautiously. Ranger led the way, nose low and alert. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of decay. Boxes and crates were stacked haphazardly, casting eerie shadows under the flickering fluorescent lights. Suddenly, a muffled cry echoed from a back room. Jake sprinted toward the sound, Ranger close behind. There, tied to a chair, was a teenage girl, frightened but alive. Relief flooded Jake's chest. She introduced herself as Sarah, another victim who had escaped Mark's control. With Sarah's help, the puzzle began to fall into place. Mark and his accomplices had been running a secretive, dangerous operation, exploiting vulnerable families, keeping children isolated, and silencing those who dared to escape. Jake's jaw tightened. The fire, the disappearances, the hidden victims, all part of a plan to bury the truth. "We've got to shut them down," Jake said fiercely. Lisa nodded. "And protect the kids." That night, back in the precinct, Jake and Lisa reviewed the evidence, formulating a plan. They would strike before the network could disappear again. Ranger lay beside them, alert even in the quiet. The clock was ticking. Every moment counted. Because in the shadows of Maplewood, the fight for justice was only just beginning. The early morning fog clung to the streets of Maplewood like a lingering shadow, softening the harsh outlines of buildings and trees. But beneath that quiet veil, a storm was gathering. One that would shake the town to its core and finally bring long-awaited justice. Inside the precinct, Officer Jake Carter and Detective Lisa Morales stood surrounded by officers preparing for the raid that would end the nightmare unfolding over the past weeks. The warehouse, the secret hideout of Mark Matthews' network, was their target. Jake looked down at Ranger, who sat patiently, tail wagging slightly, but eyes sharp and alert. "This is it, partner," Jake said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. Lisa nodded. "We take no chances. Lives depend on this." The operation was swift and methodical. Police cars encircled the warehouse, officers in tactical gear fanning out to cover every exit. Jake and Elisa led the way, Ranger at the front, nose to the ground, tracking the faintest sense of those still trapped inside. Inside the building, the air was thick with tension. Shadows loomed like specters, and the musty smell of neglect filled every corner. Yet beneath the fear was a flicker of hope. Rescue was close. Ranger's barking echoed sharply as he zeroed in on a locked door at the back of the warehouse. Jake signaled for backup and began to pry it open. The door gave way, revealing a small room where several children and teenagers huddled, eyes wide with fear and relief. The youngest among them clung to one another, whispering prayers for safety. Jake moved in swiftly, calming the frightened group. "You're safe now. We're here to help." Lisa and the team began freeing the captives, their faces lighting up with gratitude as they realized the nightmare was ending. Outside, as the captives were escorted to waiting ambulances, the crowd of reporters and neighbors gathered, watching in stunned silence. The news of the raid spread like wildfire. Maplewood was finally free from the shadow that had haunted it for too long. Jake stood back, watching Ranger greet each rescued child with gentle licks and tail wags. The dog's silent strength had been a beacon of hope throughout the ordeal. As the sun rose higher, the town seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. But for Jake and Lisa, the work was far from over. In the days that followed, the community rallied to support the survivors. Counseling services were arranged, foster homes opened their doors, and a foundation was established to help victims rebuild their lives. Sarah Matthews, Emma's mother, spoke at a town meeting, her voice shaking but filled with determination. This experience has tested us all, but it has also shown the power of courage and community. Together, we can heal. Jake and Lisa attended quietly, pride swelling in their hearts. Their team had not only brought criminals to justice, they had saved lives and given hope to those who had lost it. One afternoon, Jake found a quiet moment to visit Emma at the hospital. The little girl was sitting up in bed, coloring pictures with bright crayons. "Hey, Emma," Jake said softly. She looked up, smiling. "Hi, Officer Carter." Jake pulled up a chair. "You're doing great." Emma's eyes sparkled. "I'm gonna be okay, right?" Jake nodded. "You're one of the strongest kids I know." Emma grinned. "And I have Ranger to thank for that." Jake chuckled. "He's pretty amazing." As Jake left the hospital, his phone buzzed with a message from Lisa. "Case closed, for now." He smiled. There would always be new cases, new challenges. But for now, justice had been served. That night, Jake sat on his porch, Ranger at his side, watching the stars twinkle in the clear sky. The quiet was a balm after weeks of chaos. He thought of the children, the families, the town that had come together in the face of darkness. And he thought of the bond between man and dog, a partnership built on trust, courage, and loyalty. Because sometimes heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes they wear badges. Sometimes they have 4 paws and a keen nose. Thank you for following this story of bravery, hope, and the unbreakable bond between a man and his dog. What do you think is the most important quality in a hero? Courage, loyalty, or something else? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories of real-life heroes on brave animals.